Hello and welcome back to Bicyclelegs and another edition of Studio Albums Ranked. Today we're going to be looking at the catalogue of the legendary British rock band Queen. I mean, what do I need to say about this band that hasn't already been said? You know, Freddie Mercury, Brian May, Roger Taylor, John Deacon. Four wonderful musicians, four wonderful songwriters, made a brilliant catalogue of music. We've got 15 albums in total to be looking at, and I'm going to be ranking them from my least favourite to my most favourite. Remember, these are all my opinions. Your opinions may vary, and I'd love to hear what your rankings are in the comments. Which of these are your favourite albums, which ones maybe you don't care for so much, etc, etc. Where you agree with me, where you don't agree with me. So let's get into it. The first couple of albums that are on my list, like I'll be starting at the bottom, going up. The first couple of albums are not, to me, great albums, but the rest of the catalogue is mostly really, really wonderful. We're going to start with my number 15, and it is going to be their 15th and final album, and that is Made in Heaven from 1995. Now, of course, this was released 4 years after Freddie sadly passed away. It's made up of a few tracks that Freddie recorded at the end of his life, but a lot of it is actually solo tracks either by Freddie or by Roger Taylor, which Freddie sang on, that have been reimagined as Queen songs and that sort of thing. And for me, that's one of the main reasons that this album doesn't really work. It is a bits and pieces album. It probably would have been best as an EP of the few songs that they had recorded right at the end of Freddie's life. But it just, yeah, it's got a mournful tone to it. It doesn't have that joyousness that you get with a lot of Queen music. You know, there's still a couple of really good songs on here. Heaven for Everyone was the single, and it's pretty good. But again, that was a solo thing originally. You know, yeah, but most of the album, it feels bits and pieces-y. It's a coda to a great discography, but as an album, I don't feel it really stands up. A lot of that could also apply to the next album we're going to have a look at, my number 14, and that is the Flash Gordon soundtrack. Again, there's some good musical ideas on here. It's mostly instrumental. Of course, Flash, the title song, was a big hit for them. But you got, you know, it's a lot of instrumental stuff. It's bits and pieces. It's meant to be a soundtrack. There's a lot of dialogue from the movie in here, and I'm not a big fan of that. It has its moments, but it's not, I don't think anyone's really going to argue that the Flash Gordon album is a great Queen album. It's fine for what it is, but it's not essential Queen by any stretch of the imagination. My number 13 is going to be their album from 1986, and that is A Kind of Magic. This is very much Queen in their sort of pop phase. You know, there's still a couple of rockers and that sort of thing on this album, and this is a good album. It's not a great Queen album, but it's a good album. You know, things like One Vision, which they wrote in the aftermath of Live Aid, Princes of the Universe. A lot of these songs were also used in the soundtrack for the movie Highlander. This is not quite a Highlander soundtrack album, but almost is. You know, the title track, A Kind of Magic, is a great pop song. Some of the other songs I'm not so keen on, like Pain is So Close to Pleasure and Friends Will Be Friends. Who Wants to Live Forever, though? Absolutely achingly gorgeous ballad, sung by both Brian May and Freddie Mercury. Love that song to death. It's a up and down album, this one, but it's definitely got its moments. My number 12 is going to be their album from 1989, and that is The Miracle. And again, you know, they're very much in their sort of 80s pop phase at this stage. I like this album a little bit better than A Kind of Magic, though. There's just a few more songs I think that I like on this album. Things like Khashoggi's Ship and the title track, The Miracle. I love that song, and the film clip for it is just absolutely delightful. I Want It All, great sort of Brian May rocker. The Invisible Man, it's a divisive song, but I quite like it. Breakthrough's a great single as well. Scandal, yeah. Again, there's a few songs that aren't so great on it. You know, My Baby Does Me and Rain Must Fall, but on the whole, I think this is just slightly more consistent than A Kind of Magic. So that's why I'm ranking it at number 12. At number 11, I'm going to have what is going to be a lot of people's least favourite Queen album. It's not my least favourite Queen album at all. That is Hot Space from 1982. I have done a In Defense Of episode on Hot Space. I will leave a link to that in the description. Please do check it out if you haven't already. I won't go into too much detail here because, as I say, I've done a whole episode on this album. But suffice to say, this album, I think, it's not prime Queen by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's a better album than people give it credit for. People call it their dance album, their funk album. Side 1, sure. Side 2 is much more sort of traditional Queen. But, you know, and it's got Under Pressure on it. Come on. One of my favourite Queen singles with the wonderful David Bowie. But, you know, things like Staying Power and Back Chat, I think, are great for that sort of dance funk thing that they were going for. Put Out the Fire is a great rocker. Calling All Girls is sort of a new wavy song. It was released as a single, sank without a trace. I think that's a shame because I really, really love that song. Las Palabras de Amor, you know, it's something that Queen have done before. You know, Brian May has written a song like that before on the album that we're going to talk about next, in fact. I like Cool Cat. Yeah, I think this is a better album than a lot of people give it credit for. It's, as I say, it's coming number 11 out of 15. So obviously I don't think it's, you know, top shelf Queen by any stretch. But it's a much better album, I think, than people give it credit for. My number 10 might surprise some people. They might think it should be a little bit higher in the rankings and that sort of thing. It's their album from 1976, and that is A Day at the Races. Now, this is a bit of a surprise for me too when I was doing my list, because this has my favourite Queen song on it. And my favourite Queen song is a famous Queen song, so it's not a deep cut or anything like that. It's Somebody to Love. Just heartbreakingly beautiful song. Love it to death. I just feel like this album's, for all of their 70s albums, and I think most people will say that the 70s Queen is the best Queen, and I think you'll find as I get higher up in my ranking that you'll find that I mostly agree with that. But I would say of their 70s albums, this is my least favourite. It's the least consistent. Tia Toriati is the song I was talking about being a sort of a Las Palabras de Amor, sort of being a parallel of, you know, those two songs. They're both sort of songs in foreign languages, or at least partly in foreign languages, and they've got a similar musical feel to them and that sort of thing. I mean, this has also got, you know, Good Old Fashioned Loverboy and Tie Your Mother Down, which are both really great Queen songs. But, you know, a lot of this feels like A Night at the Opera redone and not done as well. That's just my opinion of it. I'm not a big fan of songs like You and I, or White Man, or Drowse. But it's still got its moments. I just like a lot of the other sort of 70s Queen albums better than this one. And as you'll see, a few of the 80s ones as well. My number 9 is going to be their album from 1980, and that is The Game. Of course, this has two of their biggest hit singles on it in Crazy Little Thing Called Love and Another One Bites the Dust. I love Another One Bites the Dust. Crazy Little Thing Called Love is fine for what it is, but, you know, I don't really need to hear Queen doing rockabilly. Play the Game's a great song. Dragon Attack, I feel, starts to point a little bit, along with Another One Bites the Dust, point a little bit in the direction of where they would go with Hot Space. Don't Try Suicide is a weird song because I like the concept of the lyric, but the music is just so sort of bouncy and jaunty, it just doesn't really fit the lyrical content at all. I mean, sometimes that sort of juxtaposition can work. I mean, I'm a huge They Might Be Giants fan. They do that sort of thing all the time with sort of, you know, breezy lyrics with breezy music with dark lyrics. This doesn't really work in that attempt, I don't think. This has got beautiful Save Me on it, though. I love that. I used to own that single when I was a kid, and always really loved that song. Again, there's really big highlights on this album, but it's not a consistent album, and I think that happened quite a bit to Queen in the 80s, that they would have these sort of peaks and valleys kind of albums. They'd have, you know, high highs and low lows. But it's a good album still, though. It's not one I reach for regularly. The next album we're going to have a look at is my number 8. It is their album from 1984, and that is The Works. Now, I was 13 when this album came out, and I really loved it. The singles off this, you know, Radio Gaga, still one of my favourite Queen songs. I Want to Break Free is a great song too. It's a Hard Life is kind of more harking back to 70s Queen, I feel. Tear It Up's a great rocker from Brian May. Machines or Back to Humans, I always really like that song. Hammer to Fall, another really great rocker. Man on the Prowl, sort of another rockabilly song. Not a big fan of that one. Keep Passing the Open Windows, I feel, is a much better song sort of related to suicide and that sort of thing than Don't Try Suicide. Is This the World We Created? Beautiful ender. I really like this album. You know, it's probably the first Queen album I owned, and it still, I think, stands up. I feel like it's more consistent than a lot of the other 80s Queen albums, and that's why I think you'll find this is the highest up of the 80s Queen on my list. At number 7, we're going to have their album from 1977, and that is News of the World. I mean, this has got, you know, the massive hits, We Will Rock You, We Are the Champions. Again, you know, it's got its moments. It's, you know, it's got Sheer Heart Attack, you know, which isn't on the Sheer Heart Attack album. It's on this one, given a really punky sort of feel. I feel like this album, again, it's sort of a peaks and valleys album. It's got some really high highs, you know, and I mean, the other thing is We Are the Champions and We Will Rock You are classic Queen songs, but I never need to hear them again. I've heard them a million times. And unlike a lot of other Queen anthems that get played on the radio a lot still to this day, those ones I really do kind of tire of hearing. But and that probably brings this album down a notch or two just because of that. At number 6, I'm going to go with their debut album from 1973, Queen. This is a good album. It's a really good album. There's a lot of great songs on here. In fact, I don't think I would... This is probably the first album on this list where I'd say I really like every song on the album. What probably brings this album down a little lower than some of the other ones in my listing, in my ranking, is simply because the production on this is horrible. It's muddy. They recorded this sort of in the middle of the night on the cheap, and it sounds like it. They would become masters in the studio. You can hear glimpses of it through the murk, but this album is very murky sounding. But the songs on it, just wonderful. Keep Yourself Alive, Doing All Right, Great King Rat, My Fairy King. I mean, that's side one, wonderful. Liar to kick off side two, absolutely wonderful. You get the first great Roger Taylor rave up in modern times rock and roll. You get Son and Daughter, Jesus, and then you get just a little instrumental snatch of Seven Seas of Rye that we will hear later on the next album. It's a really, really good album, but as I say, it just kind of gets sunk by that rotten production on it. My number 5 might surprise people that it's as high on the list as it is, but I really, really love this album. It is their last album from while Freddie was still alive, from 1991, and that is Innuendo. To me, this was a wonderful album. After the 80s albums that were hit or miss, to me, this is a great album, and just a great way for Freddie to go out, because I really don't sort of think of Made in Heaven as the last Queen album. I think of that as a postscript. I think of Innuendo as the last proper, real Queen album. And what a way to go out. Freddie, sick as a dog as he was when they made this album, produces some of possibly his best ever vocals. The title track, Innuendo, what a song. I'm Going Slightly Mad, absolutely love it. Headlong, great rocker. I Can't Live Without You's definitely got some of that older Queen feel to it. Ride the Wild Wind, great. All God's People. These Are the Days of Our Lives is a heartbreaking song. I really, really love it. And the film clip will make you cry because Freddie looks so sick in that film clip. Probably the only song I don't really like on this album is Delilah. It's a bit cloying. But then you've got Don't Try So Hard, The Hitman, Bijou, and then just the absolutely incredible epic The Show Must Go On. One of my top 5 favourite Queen songs without a doubt. And what a vocal from Freddie. As I say, you know, he was sick as a dog when they were making this album, and he could still put in a vocal performance like The Show Must Go On. One of his best vocal performances ever. Just incredible. Love this album to bits. To me, as I say, this is the genuine Queen finale, and what a way to go out. Just brilliant. At number 4, we are going to have the first of 2 albums they released in 1974, and that is Queen 2. This is, you know, split into a side white and side black. It's almost exclusively like side white is all Brian May songs except for one Roger Taylor song. Side black is all Freddie Mercury. And they kind of, you know, run together each side. You know, you start off on the white side with the wonderful instrumental procession, and then you get Father to Son, White Queen as it began, wonderful. Someday, One Day, great vocal from Brian May, and then you get Roger's The Loser in the end. I always love it when Roger takes a lead vocal too. You know, absolutely great. Then you get this just absolute tour de force from Freddie on side 2. You get Ogre Battle, The Fairy Fella's Master Stroke, Nevermore, March of the Black Queen, just relentless, absolutely wonderful. Funny How Love Is, and then you get the full proper version of the Seven Seas of Rye, which would end up being their first hit single in the UK. Terrific album top to bottom. I mean, this top 5 of Queen, we are talking just brilliant, brilliant albums. This one, the production's better than it is on Queen, on the debut album. It's still not great. It would get better with the next couple of albums, but I don't feel like it it doesn't bring down the material the way it does on the Queen debut. At number 3, I'm going to have their other album from 1974, and that is Sheer Heart Attack. I think a lot of people consider this to be the first sort of classic Queen album. The production is so much better than it is on the first 2 albums. And you've just got so many great songs on here. Brighton Rock, what a way to kick the album off. Killer Queen, their first sort of smash hit single worldwide as opposed to just in the UK. You got the wonderful Tenement Funster, Flick of the Wrist, Lily of the Valley, Now I'm Here, another great single, another song that still gets played on the radio, absolutely brilliant. You got In the Lap of the Gods, you got Stone Cold Crazy, where a lot of people have said Queen were almost inventing sort of thrash metal or speed metal with that song. Of course, Metallica did a cover of it and I believe won a Grammy for it. You know, you've got the wonderful Dear Friends. You've got Misfire, the very first song written by John Deacon on a Queen album, and it's a great, great song. You've got the wonderful Bring Back That Leroy Brown, where they start getting into that sort of music hall thing that they would definitely do on the next album quite a bit. I love it when they go into that sort of, in that sort of mode. You've got She Makes Me, Stormtrooper and Stilettos, which is this sort of brooding, slow, it's a great song. And then you've got In the Lap of the Gods Revisited. Brilliant album, top to bottom. Love it to bits. My number 2 could have easily been my number 1. It's the obvious choice. It is in many ways the perfect Queen album. I am of course talking about A Night at the Opera from 1975. I know a lot of people never need to hear Bohemian Rhapsody again. I still love it every time I hear it. I don't care how many times I've heard it. I still love it. But it starts off with the vicious Death on Two Legs, you know, talking about their ex-manager and just absolutely going to town. You get the wonderful Lazing on a Sunday Afternoon, which is sort of that music hall kind of thing again, with that sort of megaphone effect on Freddie's voice. You get the wonderful I'm in Love with My Car, which was the B-side of Bohemian Rhapsody. Great vocal from Roger. Love that song. My son thinks that song is completely ridiculous. He's right. I still love it anyway. I love it because it's ridiculous. You're My Best Friend. What a gorgeous song from John Deacon. Absolutely beautiful. Then you get the wonderful sort of space folk of 39, you know, where Brian May is kind of bringing his astrophysicist hat into his songwriting, which I think is wonderful. You know, talking about sort of time dilation when you're traveling sort of close to the speed of light and all that sort of thing. You get the wonderful waltz time hard rocker Sweet Lady. You get wonderful Seaside Rendezvous, again going into that music hall mode with Roger and Freddie doing the pretend trumpets and clarinets on the vocals, all that sort of thing. Absolutely, it's delightful, absolutely delightful. Love it to bits. You get the epic Prophet song on side 2 opening up the album. Absolutely, you know, this is where Queen really sort of show their proggy side, but it's also really hard rocking as well. There's wonderful effects and that sort of thing, the vocals echoing and all this sort of thing. Absolutely love it. Love of My Life, what a beautiful, beautiful ballad that is. Good Company, again, that sort of old-timey kind of thing, but it's Brian May this time rather than Freddie Mercury. And it's a great song. Bohemian Rhapsody, obviously we've already talked about that, and then they end with their instrumental version of God Save the Queen that they would use as a closer for their concerts and that sort of thing. In many ways, as I say, the perfect Queen album. And it could so easily have been my number 1, but I'm not going on what I think is best. I'm going on what I like the best, which albums I enjoy the most. I enjoy the hell out of A Night at the Opera, but I enjoy my number 1 just a smidgen more, and that is their album from 1978, and that is Jazz. Not as many obvious songs on here, although you've obviously got Fat Bottom Girls and you've got Bicycle Race, you know. But you've also got wonderful things like Mustafa. Ah, what a great way to open an album. You've got the beautiful Jealousy in between Fat Bottom Girls and Bicycle Race. You've got If You Can't Beat 'Em, which has got wonderful, you know, those multi-tracked vocals and all that sort of thing. Let Me Entertain You is a great song. You know, Dead on Time, really great sort of heavy rocker. In Only 7 Days is great. Dreamer's Ball, again, getting in that sort of old-timey kind of thing. Fun It, great track from Roger Taylor, love it. Leaving Home Ain't Easy. Don't Stop Me Now, obviously, you know, I mean, that's one of their most famous tracks too. And it's a great one again. And then more of that jazz to close out the album. Again, Roger Taylor, you know, really sort of stepping up his game on this album. Just again, top to bottom, a lovely album, a wonderful album. And I probably just enjoy it just a teeny bit more than A Night at the Opera, just because I haven't heard it quite as much. I've listened to it a lot, obviously. I've listened to all these Queen albums a lot. But this one just isn't quite as, it doesn't have that sort of familiarity breeds contempt kind of thing. So that's probably why that one is my number one. So let's go through them again, starting at my number one, going down to my number 15. At number one, we have Jazz. At number two, A Night at the Opera. At number three, Sheer Heart Attack. At number four, Queen 2. At number 5, Innuendo. At number 6, Queen Self-Titled. At number 7, News of the World. At number 8, The Works. At number 9, The Game. At number 10, A Day at the Races. At number 11, Hot Space. At number 12, The Miracle. At number 13, A Kind of Magic. At number 14, Flash Gordon. And at number 15, Made in Heaven. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's my Queen ranking. Please do let me know in the comments what your Queen ranking is. If you can't rank all the albums, maybe give me a top 5. Let me know where you agree with me, where you disagree with me, which of these albums you love, which of these albums maybe you don't care for so much. I love reading the comments and I love replying to the comments too. So please do let me know. Please like, share and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to look at some of my other studio albums ranked shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my In Defense Of episodes, like my one on Hot Space, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see my appearances on other people's channels, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram, Twitter, and a bunch of other places. I also have a dedicated bicyclelegs Facebook page. Links are all in the doobly-doo. Please do give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.